นี่ไงได้แล้วเอ้าไอ้เหี้ยอะไรวะนี่โทโฮอ้าวตัวหายไปไหนเนี่ยอ๋อไม่ได้เข้าดีคอร์ดก็ว่าอยู่ตัวหายไปไหนวะตัวไหนอ่ะอ๋ออยู่นี่วะบางตัวแป๊บหนึ่งนะสวัสดีจ้ากลับมาอีกแล้วไปยังไงคิดเลยนะอ๋อว้ายวะอะไรเนี่ยเกิดอะไรขึ้นเนี่ยโอ้ก็ไม่ได้เกิดอะไรขึ้นดีกว่าแปลกดีไหมแปลกดีก็วันนี้ไม่มีอะไรทำ ตั้งใจระดับพี่แกเป็นสุดจริงวะวันนี้เริ่มจากวันนี้จึงตึงตึงตึงตึงตึงตึงตึงวันนี้อะไรเนี่ยวันที่2ป่ะอ๋อถูกแล้วอ๋อค้างโอเคค่อยเติบโตเป็นยังไงนะแล้วก็ เฮ้ยตกใจหมดนึกว่าหูฟังขาดสัตว์เอ้ยพรุ่งนี้หาลอกงานนะพูดตามตรงพรุ่งนี้จะหาลอกงานจานเลยแหละอุ๊ยโอ้นี่วันที่2เหรออืมตึงอ่าฮะเดี๋ยวเอามาวัดระยะนี่เขาเรียกว่าลอกงานนะฮะเอ๊ะแกทำอะไรวะเดี๋ยวนะไม่มีอะไรเลยไม่มีอะไรเลยจริงด้วยต่อเรากูทำแบบนี้บ้างใครดูนะเดี๋ยวเจอแน่วันนี้แหละหรือไม่ก็พรุ่งนี้ก็น่าจะลอกงานวันนี้ก็น่าจะแบบนี้แหละ เอาล่ะพูดตามตรงนะคนเนี้ย2021เป็นคนที่แบบแรงบันดาลใจของคนเนี้ยมันรู้มา3 ปีอ่ะแกไม่เคยหยุดเลยอ่ะดูดิคนนี้ของจริงเลยอ่ะแกไม่เคยหยุดเลยแม้แต่ครั้งเดี๋ยวนะแกเคยหยุดไหมวะแกไม่เคยหยุดมั้งเนี่ยดูดิ1,000 กว่าวันเลยเนี่ยอัดติดลืมเปิดเสียงแป๊บโอ้โอเค
to study, but I think it's okay if you don't know the human body completely. Today, I want to share different ways and tips for drawing the human body. Don't stress about it, instead try this method to study drawing bodies. You don't have to understand everything about the human body. You can start with the big features and work your way to the details. Drawing like this helps you remember positions and understand shapes more easily. As long as the general shapes get the idea across, you will be fine. Simplify the human figure by using geometric shapes. You can find the reference first and then draw a center line to keep the balance. Find the proportion of the human body based on the circle you draw on your head. Sketch boxes for the upper and lower body, and add circles for joints. Practicing this way would help you to improve your drawing.
ตึงตึงตึง
Once you understanding the overall form, try drawing based on the flow of the lines. You will want to move away from using geometric shapes for individual body parts and start to draw lines with the overall shape in mind. This approach will enhance the expressiveness of
กาก
your
กูหายไป
art.
ไหนวะไอ้เหี้ยเหลือแต่แผ่น
Observation is key, so pay attention to whole piece.
เจ้านาส
My friend, illustrator Liz taught me a method involving understanding
บอกว่าอะไรสัก
movement
อย่างเนี่ยอะไร
through a
ฟังไม่รู้เรื่องเลย
sequence of points and lines. It helps you grasp
อ๋อ
gestures,
นี่เลย
allowing for a three-dimensional understanding through practice. I think this is the
อย่าทับเลยอะ
basic way which many illustrator recommends to do when
ฝึกนี้เลย
studying body shapes. It's my first time to try this way, but it helps me a lot.
อืม
Draw your favorite character next to your drawing space, making sure the proportions match. Once you find the right proportions, practice drawing the same character in different poses using reference from Pinterest or Google. If you practice this way, it will be more fun and you will get used to drawing interesting poses faster. Not everything needs to be perfect when you draw. Finding your own method, experimenting, and expressing yourself creatively are crucial. Learning to
อะไรนะ
draw fun and you will get used once your drawing space, making sure the proportions match. Once you find the right proportions, practice drawing the same character in different poses using reference from Pinterest or Google. If you practice
ศึก
this
ษาจาก
way,
Pinterest กับ
it will be
Google
more
ใช่ไหม
fun
เมื่อกี้
and you will get used to
ถ้า
drawing
ฟังไม่ผิดนะ
interesting poses faster. Not everything needs to be perfect when you draw. Finding your own method, experimenting, and expressing yourself creatively are crucial. Learning to draw the human body takes time, but by trying out different methods and enjoying the process, you can improve a lot. Use the technique that fits your art style. I hope this video helps you. Have a good day. ตึงตึงตึงตึงตึงตึงตึง
Hey friends, in this video, I'm going to take you through step by step what I did to finally get good at drawing anatomy and poses. I can draw like this now, but when I first started, my drawings looked like this. And even though I slowly improved over time, I always felt like it was my biggest weakness until I did a 2-month training arc, which changed everything. I'll be sharing with you all the details of that training arc so you can do the same. From the exact practice methods I used, to the studies I did, how much time I was spending, and the key lessons I learned along the way. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Ori, and let's get started.
by State Man อะไร
And
นะ
over time, I always felt like it was my biggest weakness until I did a 2-month training arc, which changed everything.
before
I'll be sharing with you all the details of that training arc so you can do the same. From the exact practice methods I used, to the studies I did, how much time I was spending, and the key lessons I learned along the way. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Ori, and let's get started. So the hardest part of this training arc was actually finding the right practice method. At the time, I thought I tried everything. I bought and went through a bunch of expensive anatomy books and courses. I did gesture drawings, croquis sketches, and detailed anatomy studies. I also studied how other artists drew their anatomy and poses. Still, nothing seemed to be working, and I wasn't seeing much improvement. I felt stuck at my current level, and I kept repeating the same mistakes. It was by complete chance when, early last year, I saw that Chan, a Korean artist I really admired and had been following for a while, made a post saying he released the course. When I saw he had a whole section on figure drawing, I knew I had to check it out, and the practice method he shared in it was really game-changing for me. Here's what I learned. So according to Chan, our goal when practicing the figure is to be able to create a mannequin in our mind that is accurate, we can move around freely, and quickly visualize. And the better we become at this, the more stable and precise our figures will be when we draw. The way we go about creating this mannequin is by dividing the figure up into 3 parts. Movement, which are the movements and poses the figure can make, including how natural they look. Proportion, which is stylizing the proportions of the figure. And detail, which are the details of the body that we want to emphasize to make the figure look appealing. In the course, Chan refers to this as line, but I think that might be a bit confusing for some people. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to call it detail. The order of importance is also the same. The first is movement, because even if our proportions and details look great, if the character is walking on all fours, it's gonna look ridiculous. The second is proportions, because even if we draw beautifully detailed muscles, if the proportions are off or weird, the figure isn't gonna look good. And finally, detail comes last, because if the character is wearing clothes, a lot of the body details get hidden, so it's not as important. But if you draw sexy pin-up style characters, then details might be a priority for you. So how do we actually start practicing this? Well, even though movement is the most important aspect, we actually need to be able to draw the figure first before we can add movement to it. So we start by learning the proportions and details through these 3 steps. First, practice the individual body parts, with the priority being torso over the limbs. Because if you get the limbs wrong, you only have to fix them, but if you get the torso wrong, you have to adjust everything. The next step is to practice drawing the parts in different angles and rotations, and after that, combine them together to form the whole figure. This way of practicing parts individually before putting them back together was really game-changing for me because up until then, a lot of my figure practice was either coming from drawing the whole figure through Koki sketches or just making complete illustrations. But that was actually inefficient because, as Chan points out, drawing the entire body takes a long time, which makes it hard for us to get enough reps in to become familiar with it. And when I heard all of that, it actually started to make sense why I wasn't making much progress. At the time, it would have taken me about an hour to accurately draw the figure, because I would make a ton of errors and constantly have to fix things. But if I just focused on one part, like the torso, I could do 10 in the same time. So I literally could do 10 times more reps, and thus improve on the torso 10 times faster. Now you might go, hold on, is that not the same thing? Sure, you'd improve 10 times faster on just the torso, but the total time would end up being the same, right? Since when you draw the whole figure, you're practicing 10 times the number of parts. I thought the same, but there were 2 things I came across from reading books on how to learn effectively, which helped change my mind. The first is that there's this thing called the forgetting curve, which shows how we naturally forget things over time if we don't do anything about it. Some estimates say that we forget 50% each day that passes. I know, crazy, right? Thankfully, we can prevent this by recalling the thing we want to remember. And in our case as artists, we can do this by actually drawing the thing. Doing more reps helps to make the memory even stronger, so we lose less of it over time. This is why it's more effective to practice just a single body part and get more reps in, versus taking a long time to draw one whole figure. I also found that the fact it's easy to do means we're more likely to stick with the practice because it keeps our motivation up. I think one of the problems I had before was because drawing the whole figure took a long time and was very difficult to do, I would be inconsistent with the practice and then the forgetting curve would just start to kick in. The second reason is that the more complex the thing is, the more mistakes we're likely to make. Okay, imagine you're in Japan traveling and you want to go to the train station. You ask for directions and a kind stranger tells you, oh, it's just straight ahead. Chances of you getting lost? Basically 0%. Unless you're like me, and of course you're going to walk the complete opposite direction each time Google Maps says to go straight. Now compare that to if the stranger tells you to go down that street, turn left, walk 50 meters, go inside the first building on the right, and down the escalator. Chances of you forgetting a step and getting lost is much higher. I mean, I don't even remember what I just said. And it's the same thing with figure drawing. We make less errors by focusing on just one part because it's simpler, and that saves us time because there's less things we need to fix. So my plan for phase 1 of the training arc was to learn each body part through the following cycle. Learn the bones and muscles of the body part by studying references from books, videos, photos, and
กระดูกโบนกระดูกกล้ามเนื้อไม่ใช่ใช่ดิกระดูกกล้ามเนื้อ
3D models.
ศึกษา
And as part of the course, Chan actually includes a whole bunch of his own figure sketches, which I found super useful to learn from. So you're going to see them appear a lot in the studies I'm going to show you. Next is to draw turnarounds of the body part from memory. The key here is to draw it in stylized proportions since the whole point is to build a mannequin in our heads that we can use when we draw our characters.
วาดตาม
And the last step of
สัด
the
ส่วนที่
cycle
คิดว่า
is
ใช่
to
นะ
reflect how
ใช่ปะ
well the drawings turned out by comparing it with the references from step 1. Then after learning each body part, I would combine it with other
เปรียบเทียบกับ ก็คือลอก นั่นแหละจำแล้ววาดซะ
parts and do the same cycle for them too. Finally, to fight off the forgetting curve, I also made it a habit every day to try and sketch down from memory what I learned the day before.
every day ทุกวัน memory จากความทรงจำ
By the way,
วาดให้
if
ดู
you want
ทุก
to
วัน
learn
ใช่ปะ
more about the draw, reflect, learn cycle, I made a
เชี่ยโปรโมทวิดีโอตัวเองวะเนี่ย
whole video on it, which
อนิเมะสไตล์อาร์ตฟาสเรียนรู้ให้เร็วที่สุด ไม่ใช่ วิธี ใช่ไหมเนี่ย วิธีเรียนสไตล์อนิเมะเร็วมั้ง
I'll link to down below so you can check it out after watching this one. So here's the actual studies I did during the training arc. I hope that by seeing my journey through it and how I improved over time, you'll get a good idea of what it looks like in action and feel inspired to do your own. I'll also share some practical tips for each body part and the key takeaways I learned. Oh, and if you're enjoying the tutorial so far, I hope you consider subscribing so you don't miss out when I make a new one. So for the pelvis, I focused on learning just a simplified version of it because the real thing is super complicated. I focused on just getting the proportions and general shapes right, since I could always go back and learn the details if I need to. One useful thing about the pelvis that I learned was how it's not straight up vertical, but actually tilted down a little like this. So it's not straight up like this. And apparently there's more of a tilt in women than in men. For the ribcage, I also found that a simplified version of it was also all I needed. Similar to the pelvis, the ribcage is also not vertically straight up, but tilted back a little. So the torso naturally has an arch to it like this. I used to avoid drawing turnarounds like this because it was kind of boring. But now I don't really mind it because they are so good at helping you understand the form. It's like you're inputting a 3D model into your head that you can use whenever you draw. Now, even though most of the skeleton gets hidden when you actually draw the figure, I found that having learned them first was helpful as it gives us more of a solid understanding of how the figure is actually structured, and that makes our figure drawing more accurate and consistent. At this point, I remember I was trying to figure out a good way to simplify the torso to basic shapes. I think at the time I settled on a roundish box and roundish trapezium, and simplifying it to basic shapes is useful when you're first starting to learn it because they can act as guidelines which we can then draw the figure on top of. One interesting thing I learned about the legs was how the knee kind of changes shape as the leg bends or extends. Also, when you're drawing the legs down, it can really help to draw these perspective lines to help you place them on the ground properly. For the feet, I felt okay with just getting down the basic shape since I usually won't be drawing them in detail for most of the illustrations I draw. And again, we can always go back and learn the details when we need to. Finally, it was time to combine the leg with the torso, and it's actually starting to look like a figure now. But I had a lot of trouble with this first attempt. I found that when I practiced them separately, I had no idea how the proportions of each part would relate to the rest of the figure. So the first time you join them, it's going to be way off. The way I fixed this proportion issue was by comparing what I drew with both a realistic 3D model and Chan's figures. This helped me understand what I was doing wrong from both a realistic and stylized point of view. So I'd compare and then try to fix it. I find that it's really useful to write down notes since it can lead to deep insights, such as Chan's proportions are really elegant and beautiful. Long legs are nice. Yes, Pastori, long legs are nice. The next one's an actual insight. My proportions took too much from reality, which does not lead to a nice result when translating it to casual. Now, casual is the term Chan uses for anime stylization, which I assume is Korean. In the illustration world, this is also sometimes referred to as deformed since we're deforming things from real life when we stylize. I think this next note is from the lesson. The moment we draw deform, we are no longer drawing correct or realistic proportions. And we want to push the proportions to make it look more beautiful. This was a big breakthrough for me since it kind of lets you off the hook. like, hey, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate to reality since anime figures are already incorrect by default. And in fact, we do want to push the proportions a little so it looks even better. Of course, it doesn't mean we can disregard reality completely. We still need to learn how to draw the figure accurately enough so that it doesn't look unnatural to the viewer. It took a couple of days and many repetitions, but I started to feel the figure was finally coming together in my mind, as you can see here. Some useful things I learned about the arm was that you can think of the movement as balls and chains that link together. And that the basic form of the forearm is basically a flat box with some muscles wrapped around it. The arms took longer than expected to practice because their form changes depending on whether the palm is facing up or whether it's facing down. One useful tip I learned about the elbows was how it kind of has these three modes when viewed from the side. No bumps when it's straight down, one bump when it's bent 90 degrees, and two bumps when it's bent more than 90 degrees. When I finally combined the arms with the rest of the figure, there was this feeling of accomplishment since it was finally starting to look complete. But there was still one last part to study, which are the hands. The hands are really complicated, and I think I spent more time practicing them than any other part, but some of my key takeaways
นี่แหละ
were
ส่วนที่ยากที่สุ
the
ด
fingers actually look shorter on the palm side
Oh my
than on the
god
opposite side,
ไม่
as
ดิ
you can
ส่วน
see
ที่ยาก
here,
ที่สุดคือเท้านี่หว่า
and that there are
มือ
three fat pads
ไม่
on
อ
the
ยากของ
palm
เท้า
to
หรอก
remember:
จริง
the pinky,
ไม่ไหววะ
top, and thumb pads. These make up the form of the palm. Also, you can separate the hand up into three parts when studying them:
เจอเท้าเข้าไป
the
มัน
wrist,
แด
the
กจริง
palm, and the
อัน
fingers.
นี้พอไหวอยู่
Here's a comparison of the hand turnarounds I drew before and after practicing the hands. And according to the dates I put, apparently I spent 2 weeks just practicing them. Finally, it was time to combine everything together to form the whole body. And at the end of this first training arc, this was the figure I could now draw without references. Ironically, after spending all that time practicing the hands, I found that it just took too much time to draw them in detail when doing these turnarounds.
พวกนี้
So
รอบ
I
นาน
ended up
นะ
just simplifying them.
ว่าไว้ก่อน
But I know I can draw them in detail if I need to. There were still plenty of things that I needed to improve on, but I was pretty happy with the progress, considering that my first attempt 1 month ago looks like this. By the way, the reason I've been able to show you Chan's sketches and other images from the course is because Colosso is kindly sponsoring this video.
ขาด
If you haven't heard of them before, Colosso works with top creators to create course tips on not just figures like
Right.
this. By the way, the reason I've been able to show you Chan's sketches and other images from the course is because Colosso is kindly sponsoring this video. If you haven't heard of them before, Colosso works with top creators to create courses in various
Ooh.
fields such as illustration, animation, concept art, and 3D. Also, if you've been enjoying the tips in this video, make sure to give Chan's course a look because he goes into much more detail and provides many more useful tips on not just figure drawing, but everything else in the illustration process, like composition,
ร้องนะ
lighting,
เนี่ย
design,
อันนี้
and
มีร้อง
color.
นะเนี่ย
And personally, I learned a
บอก
ton
ไว้
from
ก่อน
him.
นะ
There'll be a link to it below, along with the special code you can use to get a discount. So how long did this all take? According to the dates I wrote, I did this between 27th March to 11 May 2022. So it was over 46 days, which is just about 1.5 months. I
Ooh,
also
that one
used this
alien
free
one,
app called Toggle to track
Amazing.
all of the time I spent on the training arc, since I find it helps with motivation to see the practice hours stack up. And according to it,
alien.
I spent 126 hours and 49 minutes, which divided over 46 days is 2 hours and 45 minutes a day. So basically, I just practiced for a few hours a day as sort of a warm-up exercise before I'd go
Hola.
work on an illustration.
อู้7,000 แรงโอ้ยอันนี้อะไรอ่ะ อันนี้ตั้งแต่สมัยก่อนเลยเหรอตัวนี้ดิ
Hey friends, in this video, I'll be sharing with you the fast learning method I
Hey,
used
somebody
to
gone.
go from
I didn't go
clueless
ahead, yeah.
beginner to drawing at a level where I could finally build a following and do work for companies such as HoloLive, where I recently drew an illustration for Watame. Draw, reflect, learn cycle. That's it. The secret formula is that simple. This
วาด
method will always work no matter what
Anh
your
cứ
skill
lại.
level is.
อันเนี้ยเรียนรู้ อันเนี้ยอะไร อ๋อจำได้ละ
Always work no matter what your skill level is or what you're trying to learn. Characters too. It didn't because I had no idea, but it would also make me good at drawing other things like characters too. It didn't because I had no idea how to transfer what I was learning into actually drawing anime characters.
เนอะ
And it was only when I realized, oh, if I want to get good at anime illustrations, I just have to draw anime illustrations and not go in a roundabout way
อัน
by
นี้ของอัน
doing
ตราย
these
เลย
fancy classes and whatnot, which may be slightly related, but not really, that I finally started to improve at it. I had the exact same problem with trying to improve my anime figures by doing croquis sketches. I did a ton of them, and I honestly didn't feel like I was improving much.
ภาพเก่า
This was because the croquis
2020
sketches I did was still too different than the stylized characters I was
เอ
drawing.
อเป็นของแก
It
ละ
was only when I started taking the time of taking the real life figure and then directly stylizing them into anime as part of the practice that I started to make massive improvement. This extra process, whereas just leaving it as the real life figure wasn't enough for my brain to make that connection. So after doing research, I found that the reality is that skills are very specific to the domain, which is the area of expertise you're in, and to the situation that you're using that skill. There's this really good article on topic titled Do the Real Thing by the author Scott Young, which I'll quote from. There's an enormous literature about the narrowness of acquired skills. Learn to do X and then switch to... There's an on topic
แผน แผนที่ แผนที่ควรทำปะแผน
titled Do the Real
แผ
Thing
น
by
ที่
the author Scott Young,
แผนที่ แล้วอันนี้ก็คือแผนที่ที่มัน
which
แบ
I'll
บ
quote from.
ไปไม่ถึง
There's an enormous
By Mr. Lucky.
literature about the narrowness of acquired skills. Learn to do X and then switch to doing Y, and you often
to the left ทำในสิ่งที่จริง อะไรวะ อ่านไม่ออก อ่านไม่ออกสักคำเลยอันตรายสกิล เรียนรู้สกิล X and the
often take a huge performance hit even if X and Y are superficially similar. With practice, for instance, you can
ดูทำไมแล้วมันเอาอ่านบอก อ่านสีดำอะไร
get better at discriminating vertical lines, but switch the test to horizontal lines and the benefit of training goes away. There'll be a link to the article down below, and I recommend giving a read if you struggle with this kind of thing.
การฝึก
So make sure that you're actually drawing what you're trying to get good at and don't substitute it with a fake alternative, even though it's very, very tempting because it's often easier. And when
ภาษา
you're
อังกฤษแข็ง
practicing,
แรงเหลือเกินตอ
try
น
to
นี้
make it as close to the real thing as possible, such as taking that extra step of stylizing the studies you do from real life. The next step is to reflect, which means get feedback on whatever you just drew. It can be an indicator that you're doing something you drew a year before and you're like, that's pretty cool. I have improved a bit.
That's very good.
Okay. You want to study is the hair, then just copy the hair part.
Copy.
Now, I don't recommend tracing. I'm really curious to see how much of a difference it actually makes, so let's try it out.
From previous testing, I usually find that the more sensitive the pen is, the thinner the thinnest stroke.
I'll go back to learning
ก็คือหาเล็บก่อน เราก็หาเล็บก่อน เล็บเราใครวะ เดี๋ยวนะ คนนั้นนะชื่ออะไรวะ หาภาพก่อนนะ มีว่ะโอเค หาเล็บก่อน รู้แล้ว จ้า เอ๊ะ แกชื่ออะไรวะ ลืมชื่อแกเฉยเลย เดี๋ยวหาภาพแกก่อนน่าอยู่แถวนี้อ้าว แกชื่ออะไรวะ หาในโทรศัพท์แป๊บนึงนะ โทรศัพท์แบตหมด หลาดเอ้ย มีอยู่คนนึงอะสไตล์แม่งสไตล์เท่มาก ของอเมริกาผสมไอ้เนี่ยผสมญี่ปุ่นเนี่ยสนุก ก่อนอื่น ขอไปอาบน้ำก่อนนะ เออ อะไรแม่
ได้ไข่พะโล้
จ้า
ไข่พะโล้จ้า
จ้าไปอาบน้ำแล้วจ้า
นี่จ้า
เออ
เอา
เออ
รับ
ไม่
ไปเมนได้เลย
아, 그림도 1차 해보겠습니다. 그림 일기
ฮะ
1차부터
อ๋อพี่ชายพูด เอ้า เสียงดับ เฮ้ย ลืมปิดไมค์
Like here, I'm breaking down the figure into different shapes. By doing this, I can get visual art techniques. Here's trying to figure out how to use every tool. Like here, I'm breaking down the figure for those of us who struggle with organization, with visualizing form and its movement and energy, not sweating the tiny detail. I isolate the arms and legs in different positions and just focusing. It makes consuming entertainment for ages without even it limits your creativity. As you become more confident, you can experiment with stylization and push the limits of proportions for a more dynamic look. The more you practice stylizing your subject, the more comfortable you'll become with manipulating anatomy for your desired effect. Stylization is all about having fun and being creative, but it can be very frustrating if you don't know the basics. Anatomy makes it all work, so even if you're going for a super stylized look, don't skip out on anatomy practice. When you have solid foundation of the subject, your strokes become more intentional and it's way more fun to create something that looks cool and believable.
Hey friends, in this video, I'm going to go through every